Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, director of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and it's my pleasure to be your host for tonight's conversation with Adrienne Tarver and Mia DeMarr. We're presenting this event tonight in connection with the exhibition Roots, Water, Air, an installation by Adrienne that was curated by Mia and is on view at the Brattleboro Museum through March 8th. You can learn more about the installation on our website, brattleboromuseum.org. Shortly, Adrienne and Mia are going to come on. They're going to have a conversation. And then after the conversation, we'd love for you to participate in a Q&A. And they'll be happy to respond to your questions and comments at that time. And we'll do it that way rather than during the conversation itself. If you'd like to submit a question or a comment, please just use the Q&A button on your screen. You can do that at any time, like if something occurs to you while the conversation's happening, go ahead and put it in the Q&A, but we'll wait until the end to get to those. Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask Adrienne and Mia to please join me on screen, and I'm going to just tell you a little bit about them. Hey there.
Hello.
Hi, Mia.
Hi.
Thanks for being here tonight, both of you. For all of you in the audience, Adrienne Elise Tarver is an interdisciplinary artist based in Brooklyn with a practice that includes painting, sculpture, installation, photography, textiles, and video. Her work addresses the complexity and invisibility of Black female identity, including the history within domestic spaces, the fantasy of the tropical seductress, and the archetype of the all-knowing spiritual matriarch. Adrienne has exhibited nationally and abroad, including solo shows at the Aldrich Museum, the Academy Art Museum in Maryland, Atlanta Contemporary, Wave Hill in the Bronx, and many other places. She recently received the Distinguished Alumni Award from her alma mater, Boston University, and the Nancy Graves Foundation grant. She's been commissioned for projects through the New York MTA, the Public Art Fund, Google Art Aspen, and Pulse Art Fair. She received her MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and her undergraduate degree from BU. Mia DeMarr is from Los Angeles. She launched her college career at Clark Atlanta University and then received a BA in art history from Georgia State, and then an MA in visual arts administration from NYU. Mia served as assistant director at the NYU Kimmel Center Galleries, organizing and curating over 100 exhibitions in 6 years. She curated Respectfully Yours at the Queens Museum and was a member of the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport Art Program Public Art Team. She founded Pi Arts Projects and is the co-founder of Black Women in Visual Art. Mia is the director of Peg Alston Fine Arts in New York City and an independent curator, arts administrator, writer, and art consultant. Really nice to see you both on this wintry night. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure and honor. I'm going to disappear right now, but I'll come. Just let me know when it's time for Q&A, and I'll come back on, and we'll do that together.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you. Hi there, Adrienne. It's great to see you.
Hi, Mia. Good to see you too.
Been a long time coming. I was glancing back in June of, was that 2023, 2022? When we went to Brattleboro, I can't remember, it's like 2025 already. So, but it was like much warmer and we had like fried fish at the dock.
Walk along the river.
Yeah, it was really
outdoor
beautiful.
time. Yes. Different environment.
Yeah, and it's a very inspiring place, Brattleboro. Just quite scenic and also quaint at the same time, and a stone's throw from the city. So it was a wonderful respite. So just fond memories just overall with cultivating this exhibit. So I have a few questions. Some of them are just very basic, and really just I'm interested in your like artist origin story. I think every artist either like, hey, I've been an artist for as long as I can remember, or something happened, I took a class. There're just a lot of ways that artists sort of land within their practice. So what is your artist origin story, and how did you get here?
Yeah. First, thank you for inviting me to do this exhibition at Brattleboro. So that trip that we did was also kind of I think we kind of like knew about each other for a while, but it was the first sort of beginning of our relationship. So it was really nice to get to kind of go on the site visit together and have that experience and to get to know what this space was and this museum was. My origin story, I am one of those like, oh, I've always been an artist, and that I was the artistic kid. I was the kid who always had a sketchbook, who was going to my brother's basketball games and tennis matches and baseball games with the bag of art supplies, and all the kids knew that I had the art supplies. So I've always been that kid. But I've always had a vast interest in lots of different art forms. I played the flute, I danced, I have always I've been a maker of all sorts. And so the impulse to make has been there forever, and the decision to become a visual artist as a career path I owe to my parents, who really encouraged that path, which I know is not the usual trajectory for a lot of artists. I wasn't sure that it like what to do, and like that was the practical thing to do. I still don't know that it's the practical thing to do, but it's the thing that I did, and I'm glad that I've done it because it feels like I do feel just compelled to make and express and have conversations with people through visual art. And that's come out in very different ways. And this exhibition is one way that it's more immersive. My background has been painting. My degrees are both in painting, but my practice is very interdisciplinary. And this show is really an expression of a lot of those different parts of my interdisciplinary practice and how those have kind of coalesced in wanting to have immersive experiences for viewers.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned sort of like knowing of each other, because I certainly just on social media and Instagram, your work is just very, it just stands out. And I've followed you, and I'm also a lover of plants. I'm a plant mom. And so this opportunity to curate an exhibition at Brattleboro, I immediately was like, oh, I can work with Adrienne Tarver. Because I'm just a fan of how you're able to weave these like scenes of some of my favorite things and themes. So your work is obviously inspired by nature. What aspects of nature are you most sort of drawn to?
It's been so I've always loved plants. I have, a lot of core memories of plants in my like my mom had a particularly green thumb and would always like propagating plants. Like I remember like little pothos with their like their roots, roots, I think about human and plants kind of having similar trajectory. So it's kind of a interesting slip that I call them veins, but their roots kind of propagating in water. And so like I have all these core memories. We have a Georgia connection. I grew up partially in Georgia, and so there's this sort of lushness to the South, the American South, and things like sort of the overgrown kudzu as you're going down the highway, and things, which really kind of can overtake things completely. So you see like ruins of houses or cars or something that are overtaken by kudzu. So the sort of power of nature and the overgrowth has always really impacted me. When we were in Georgia, our backyard like was sort of amongst the forest. So like you get to be sort of in a lot of the neighborhoods are like around like lots of trees. And so I was just in nature. And it just has always felt really compelling to me. And I think the work became more and more centered on nature as there was a point in grad school where I had like houseplants in painting, like interior paintings with like people and like sort of home spaces, domestic spaces where they're houseplants, and a professor pointing out to me that the plants had their own, like felt like they were their own character. And so I started to think about like, well, where is this plant from and what's the origin story of the plant? And that really kind of spurred this whole other thought process. And then I moved right after grad school to Australia, where I was again kind of around like overgrowth of like large plants. And it was this sort of like long trajectory of recognizing this sort of life force I was seeing in plants and the connection I was seeing to it. And it really kind of led down this route in the work between seeing the sort of parallels between plants and people, particularly the diasporas of plants and people, and where as a plant, like the plant that we have in our house, the house plants, like where is it actually from? How did it make its way here? Why is it like, why can it survive in the pot when it's clearly maybe not the like most ideal environment? It wants to be out in the world. And so just kind of thinking about those like ideas as it relates to plants.
Yeah, and trees, because I mean, and we can take a look at the exhibit, but there's in the video, it's just completely lush. I thought you were in another country. And so, I mean, you can talk a little bit about the video and where it was filmed and your process, but I also think about like the plants and the trees and the roots that sort of spoke to the title, how these elements work, well, how the element of air and water sort of nurture the roots and the trees and the plants. So maybe we can
You want me to show so I have a little,
just share a little bit so everyone knows what we're talking about if they
Yeah.
haven't had an opportunity to visit the installation, but it's really rich,
sorry.
quite rich.
So I'm just gonna just start with, this is a short video of documenting the installation because it's a multimedia installation with video, sound, and yeah, for the projections. I wanted to make sure that the video captures that. So if you might want to turn your sound up if you are listening. So that's the video documentation where you can hear the sound piece. So each video has its own sound of there's the water sound, there's the sound of the footsteps walking along the path, so that video to the left, and then the wind that's kind of blowing the foliage, so the video in the front. So all of those sounds are part of it to add to the sort of immersive experience, but then also the sort of sound piece that's additional to the sort of natural sounds of the environments are the distorted voices of a choir, and I say choir loosely, of a church congregation singing Wade in the Water, and that kind of comes in and out. When you're in the space, you can kind of hear it come in and out a little bit more subtly or immersively than I can really produce for you in a video like this, but wanting that to feel like you can't quite tell where it's coming from, and feeling a little of maybe a different time, and that it's not necessarily of that moment or of your present moment or of that space exactly. Like, where are those voices is kind of part of that.
And that's fascinating to me because originally, being in Brattleboro and at the museum, is it the Connecticut River, I believe, that runs behind the museum, and the museum is also a former railroad, and then there's this beautiful mountain side, and I just remember thinking about the many like centuries that the water has flown in the river and the trees have grown there on the mountain. Thinking about the time when there was a railroad and people were traveling along this river, and just the timelessness of nature, you know, to our sort of human understanding, like how long has this river been flowing? And then what you sort of captured in the installation too is just like, where are these voices coming from? What time is this? Is this the
Yeah.
future, past? And you were really able to capture that, you know, without a lot of like unpacking of just how I originally felt, how I initially felt sort of being in Brattleboro, and sort of experiencing just the space. It definitely, you definitely captured this like sense of timelessness.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think so much about how the earth, the nature, like the timeline that we're existing in is so different. We're such a small blip in the reality of these land, these plants, the rocks, the water, like all these things are existing on a much different timeline. And so the ancestors that we might be hearing, or like thinking about those voices, or the people after us, like we're, for the plants, for the water, like we're all sort of compressed in time. We're all actually existing together. And so that kind of the smallness or the sort of connectivity of all of these different generations is something that I think is really important to the work and important to things that I'm thinking about. You'd asked me before I showed the video, and I'd forgotten, or I can mention it now, is the like where the videos were taken and sort of some of the trajectory of that work. So I did a residency in the Azores, which is a small archipelago of islands off the coast of Portugal, in 2023. Yep, sorry, the time is weird. In the summer of 2023, and there was a very interesting residency for many reasons. A lot of my work thinks about, again, diasporas, particularly the Black diaspora, and the trajectory of enslaved people coming from Africa, West Africa, through the Atlantic to the Americas, and the sort of whole route of the Americas. And that in that sort of the water, the body of water is the Atlantic, and this archipelago is in the middle of the Atlantic and is sort of on that route. And so thinking about this as this like stopping place, or this this in-between place in this route that has the like such a fraught and difficult history for the Black diaspora, and this land, these islands, like possibly holding, you know, memories or bodies or histories of that transition, of that trajectory. So all the videos are from the Azores, and the sort of lush tropical landscape is this reoccurring imagery in my work that speaks to the sort of idealized paradise, Eden type of space, and the ideas we have of sort of escaping into something like, you know, a utopic type of Eden. And then also the sort of the fraught histories of tropical spaces that have been cultivated for plantations of fruit and crops. And so there's all like everything has sort of the beauty and the destruction and the difficult and the good. And so like the water is, you know, this thing that is purifying and flows and it's beautiful and there's all these positive associations, and it also is literally quite a graveyard of this like difficult part of history. And you know, the oceans especially are destructive, and we've got, you know, tsunamis, and we've got, you know, all of these different, so there, it's like, it's terrifying and it's beautiful. And so those, like, all of these dichotomies are things that I'm interested in, and I'm never trying to like simplify the story. It's always sort of about all of these things together.
Yeah. And just being able to sort of witness the different projections, because there's the one where you're walking the path, and then the water, and then sort of the lush landscape. And then there's also the painting. So do you have a detail of the painting? Because it's just really fascinating, that sort of layering of material. Because I think you said it's just a screen, right? Like a window screen or a door
It's wire
screen?
mesh, which is essentially like you
Just
can
a,
buy it and roll. So it's the same stuff that is in your windows as window screen,
okay.
but before it's put
Okay,
into the
wire.
screen. Yeah, wire mesh. Yeah. Which you can see more clearly here on the left, the mesh, and then the material on top of that is latex caulking. And so it's the stuff you like use in bathrooms, but it has the quality of paint, the sort of viscosity and thickness and movement. And so the hanging painting itself is white, but with the projection onto it, it takes on the color of the projection.
Yeah, it just feels like you're able to experience texture in this space where you have a projection, and and you do get this kind of like three-dimensional component that's wire mesh and plaster, but it's also, you know, makes sense with the negative space of the leaves. And it's just a really sort of, and then also the projection onto the painting. And it's just, it was a very well executed element and component. And I know we talked a little bit about the kind of trajectory, like how this project has served as sort of like a springboard, so to speak, about the possibilities for installations like this sort of multimedia experience. I mean, it was like an experience, you know, it's not something that you're just kind of walking through. It was an experience, the sound component, the projection, the lighting, the painting. So can you share a little bit about where you kind of see this leading you in your project?
Yeah, it was really exciting to see this space at the Brattleboro Museum and realize like, oh, in this space, which is, it's a white box, but it serves as a black box. There's no windows. And so it's somewhat rare actually to have an exhibition space with no windows. And I don't know that everybody always is excited to have a space with no windows, but for me, it was like this point of like, oh, this is the space to be able to do an immersive video installation, which I've been thinking about for a while. I've been working in video for 8 or 9 years or so. Yeah, I think maybe my first video project was about 2016. And so I had been thinking about video for a long time. I've been learning it as I've been working in it. And so I haven't had sort of a super complicated video installation because I'm still figuring out the medium myself. And so it allowed me to push this part of my practice in a way that felt like it was sort of catching up to other parts of my practice, because I do work in installation and I've had other immersive installations that are more physically immersive and less about the projected video version of immersive. And so it allowed me to think about how I wanted the space to function and how I wanted the audience's attention to move and shift. And there's this difference between, you know, video and painting where there's a time element. And so you understand people are going to either stay with it and see the whole thing, or they might only get a portion of it. So you kind of make peace with the fact that people might not see the whole thing. And so even more so, I think that happens in this kind of installation where there's 3 different videos, and for somebody to see the whole thing, they'd have to sit through the whole the whole trajectory of each video and like pay attention to each one. And even then you're not getting the whole thing, because if you're looking at this one, you're not seeing this one. And the videos are not synced up to always be at the same moment with each other at the same time. So it actually, they're always like a little bit different. And so the video is also the sort of like moving experience and moving, not quite ephemeral, but it's always going to be a little bit unique in that your attention is kind of always going to be shifting.
Right.
And
Depending
so I
on,
hope to be able to do more, to say the
Yeah.
trajectory, I hope to be able to do more and continue to sort of push my own, knowledge and work with video and immersive installations, but also, just responding to different spaces and different venues with that kind of installation.
do you feel like you were able to sort of, I won't say master, but did this experience allow you to sort of flex your ability in terms of advancing the practice? Like you were saying, you are getting a sort of stronger grasp of the video media, and I guess I'm trying to think, the projections. I mean, this would have been the first time that I've experienced your work in, like you said, the white cube windowless with the projection. But is there something that you experienced here that you think you've sort of mastered or have learned or gotten a stronger grasp?
I don't know about mastered. Yeah, mastered is a hard word, but I just feel like I will always be resistant to that, because I feel like I'm just a perpetual student and happy to be that.
Yeah.
It makes me feel freer to do what I want in the studio, to just always know I'm a student and figuring things out.
Maybe add
But
to your toolkit.
what was that?
To include to your toolkit, like something
Yeah.
in your toolbox that you were advancing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot to learn, but I think, yeah, what I've understood is how many more levers I can pull in working with more than one video. There's a very different experience. Like what's beautiful about an exhibition like this too is when I'm creating it, when I was working on the videos, I couldn't experience the piece. When you're making a painting or when you're making even like the hanging installations or whatever, like I can experience it pretty fully in my own space, in my studio. And when I'm making a video, I'm experiencing it on my laptop, I can put it onto a screen and see it. With this, I couldn't really experience it until I was in the room and could see all the projections. And I have like the mock-up that I'd sent to Sarah and the museum of like, okay, this projector, it's like a little video, like this projector here, this projector this way, this projector this way here, the videos is video 1, video 2, video 3. So I had conceptualized it, but hadn't experienced it myself. And so that's something that is really, I think, unique and interesting to working in this way, and kind of just makes it exciting. And so I hope to be able to conceptualize things that then I can also realize in this way as well.
And then if you could share a little bit about the figure, because it's part of your visual vocabulary, the feminine, we see her a lot. Maybe you can detail a little bit about what she symbolizes and why she is a reoccurring figure and image in your vocabulary.
Yeah, so I'm very concerned or centered in my work on Black women, the Black female figure. I speak about the Black female figure in kind of two different ways. There's this character that I've developed in my work. I've named her Vera Otis. She has a lot of specific elements about her. I talk about her as a surrogate figure, as somebody who kind of can be everyone and no one, but I can place sort of ideas, thoughts, hopes, dreams, fears of my own onto her. I can also incorporate details and thoughts and experiences of family members or famous people that I've been researching or things that I'm thinking about onto her. So she acts as this vessel for all of that. And so she's kind of the more specific character that reoccurs. I would say in this piece, in this shadow female figure, I would interpret this figure as Vera. It doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't matter to me that people know or don't know that. I kind of have moments where I'm like, okay, this is definitely Vera, and moments where I'm like, not necessarily her. And then there's figures in my work that are more mythological. Usually when the figures are nude, they tend to be more of the like idea of the female figure, the mythological figure. There's a lot of collage work that I've done with the same kind of tropical imagery where there's these hidden figures inside, and that's more of thinking about this idea of these, I keep saying mythological, and there's like other kind of, I guess, synonyms for that, but they're less about the specific character that I've created. But it's all because I'm interested in exploring the complexities, the nuances of the experience of being woman, being Black woman, the perceptions, the expectations, the fears, the desires, all of these things that are, I can speak to the experiences that I'm closest to. And so that's where like my interests really lie.
Yeah, it's nice to have something that can represent everything. Be able to sort of pour all of these questions to our aspirations. I mean, when we've talked about Vera, I'm like, I need a Vera for myself. I need a Miss Vera Otis to sort of place situations to be all the things that we need. So
it's kind of like, Clark Kent and Superman. There's like, you have something that it feels like they can do more because it's removed from you, but also you kind of know it's in some ways yourself.
Yeah, and I sense her too as like a protective figure also. Like there's just something about this image here. It's very assertive and strong, and capable. And you'd get all of that from just the shadow. So do we have any questions? Danny?
Yeah, we do. And I'll just say to our audience, this would be a great time now to add your questions into the Q&A if you have any, or your comments. Thank you both for this conversation. I'm so surprised to hear, Adrienne, that this is that this is maybe your first video project in this way, or this kind of immersive video project, or at least early in your experience of doing this kind of work, because you really knocked it out of the park. Like the space is just magical to be in, and we've been watching visitors just lose themselves in there and literally get dizzy too. It particularly like facing that big wall on the left when you walk in, there are definitely people who like have to put their hand down and steady themselves. But every aspect of it, the video and the lighting and the sound, I just feel like you used the space so beautifully, and I'm so surprised to know that this isn't something you've done a lot of previously.
Well, thank you. It's funny though, you mentioned the sort of the dizzying effect of that video, because again, like I only could see it on my computer until I was there in person. So I didn't know how dizzying that video was when it's full scale. And so that was one of those moments of like, oh, this has this other sort of disorienting effect. Like I knew the audio kind of coming in and out in that way might be a little disorienting, like but I didn't realize sort of how much you would feel, because I also felt that kind of like, whoa, where, depending on where you're looking, like trying to figure out like where to put your feet, like can you, like where to move. So it's just like a funny, but I'm glad that it feels like it's not the first time. Thank you for that. I've worked again, like I've worked in video, but like it's, yeah, I've never worked in it in this kind of way. And so it's been really, rewarding and enlightening to kind of understand what the effect is outside of the sort of little diagram you can draw, but this is the idea I have.
Sure. Well, it's just been a brilliant use of the space. And Mia, that makes me curious. When Sarah Freeman reached out to you, I as I understand it, basically with an open invitation to curate something at the museum, maybe specifically in that space. How did it come about that you ended up deciding to work with Adrienne and that this is what came about?
It was an opportunity for me to work with Adrienne because
And
I
you,
mean, I have artists that that I follow, and Adrienne was just, it just felt right. I mean, I didn't even think about anyone else or anything else. It was just like, I'm gonna reach out to her. Hopefully she'll say yes. And we had no idea what the space looked like. You know, when she asked me, I didn't know. I didn't know where it was gonna be, but I did know that it would be an adventure to work with Adrienne because of the I just feel like her dynamic, and it can go in a lot of different directions as a painter. So it's just was an opportunity for me to work with an artist that I wanted to work with.
Well, I have to
well,
say, when somebody reaches out to me who knows my whole practice, there is this moment where I'm like, I work in a lot of different ways, and I often don't know what's going to come out next. And so the trust that a curator can have, and I'm very appreciative, very grateful to the trust of like, what does it feel like for you? Like, what do you want to do? And so like, it was a very fluid process of like, well, let's visit, let's talk, let's understand what this space needs, what's coming sort of next for me, what's coming out of me next. And so the trust that Mia had that the work was going to work was there was no like clarity from me from the beginning of like, yes, I think I want to do that. I did not know what I was going to do from the beginning.
Yeah. And it was organic, and it was funny because there was a moment where I was like, and I'm reading these books, Adrienne, and they make me think about this. And she's like, I'm not trying to be in this book club.
I was very busy at the moment that we reached out to her, so I was sort of like, there's a lot going on.
No. And I wanted her to know, I was like, I'm not saying that you have to read these books, but I'm reading them now, and they make me think about your work. And so that was like and she told me, she's like, I looked up these books, and they're going on the pile. I brought them
I
too.
did. Yep.
The Finding the Mother Tree, which is really beautiful, and then the Women Who Run with the Wolves, because I think that there's just so much information and so many experiences that people have that can sort of feed into what other people are doing. And so that's why it was just really funny, because I was like, I don't want you to feel like I'm because curators do that. They're like, I've heard horror stories about curators working with artists, and I'm like, no, Adrienne, is not that. I just am letting you know that I feel like these really amazing, and they make me think about the work that you're already doing and how you show up as a Black woman and as an artist. So yeah, it was just an opportunity,
fabulous.
to work together, and I'm really pleased with just how easy and wonderful and enchanting it came out.
Well, I have my own additional questions, but we have a number from the audience, so let's take a look at those. Adrienne, Curtis asks, did you draw upon the experiences of historical Black women Vermonters at all, such as Daisy Turner or Lucy Terry Prince, who worked on farms in our area?
Honestly, that has not been a part of my research so far. I will add those names to my list. That is like, I'm always happy to find new women to research, and it usually makes its way, whether it's like quite explicitly or not, it makes its way into the work. I am an avid reader researcher as a part of my practice to feed the work. And so I appreciate the names to add to the list.
Brianna asks, when making the human figure, was it challenging to make it look like a human?
I guess if the question is in relationship to the specific installation in that that figure, that might help you understand how I made that hanging painting, to understand like the figure is sort of, the silhouette is created on the mesh before the leaves are painted on. And so it's not like the figure is not made out of the leaves, if that makes sense. So the silhouette is so kind of like crisp and clean as a silhouette because it exists underneath, and then it's kind of obscured by all of the leaves, and then the projection of the foliage on top of the leaves painted on top of it make it even more obscured. So that's why the reveal is so dramatic, that it really can't be perceived because there's too much going on top of the silhouette. I don't know if that answers the question you are asking in general, and just like making a figure. It's just something through just years of training in art school, making a figure, painting a figure, all of that is just something that comes pretty naturally at this point. But the technique of that specific piece is more about a little bit of like trick of the eye.
Yeah, which works amazingly well, like so effective. Curtis is also sharing information about about an artist named Daniel Callahan, and wonders if you're familiar with Daniel's work. Daniel's based in Boston, and we did an exhibit of Daniel's work, having been introduced to him by Curtis not long ago. He did, and Curtis says he did a video to accompany a musical piece of a Black composer at the Brattleboro Music Center, and his video was of a canoe moving through the water of the West, where the West River comes down and meets. And yes, Mia, it is the Connecticut River behind the museum. And I think you both also visited the confluence of where the West River, smaller river, comes down and meets the Connecticut. And it's that spot that Curtis is telling us is where Daniel created a video of a canoe moving through the water there.
I'll have to take a look. I'm not familiar with the work, but I'm excited to take a look. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful artist. Adrienne, how did you come to work with the non-traditional art materials of mesh and caulking? Asks Kat.
Yeah, that was that's a trajectory of like my practice in general. So my background is in painting, and my undergraduate degree was very traditional oil painting, kind of the old-fashioned model of doing you know, still lifes and charcoal and all of the things. And so I had a trajectory after undergraduate where I kind of returned back to materials that I was interested in sort of as a kid and growing up, and working with just materials that were maybe more like craft based. My mom sewed a lot, so sewing and fabric. You know, just other things that weren't necessarily sort of in the fine art. You know, of course, fine art is much more expanded these days, but when I was in school, it was still a little bit, the craft materials felt separate in conversation. So I started to think more broadly. I was minoring in printmaking, and so that kind of opened my head to other ideas of working and thinking about wallpaper and printing on fabric and installation things. And so all that to say, that just was like the beginning of me thinking about materials outside of the art store and outside of, you know, oil paint on canvas. And I was thinking about this idea of the veil, and actually maybe this is a good, I have on the slideshow a couple other projects. So just to maybe explain the trajectory of the working on
mesh and
yeah. Again, it's like the mesh and the caulking, and then this is how it's often seen, where the caulking is painted. So you can still see that it's on mesh, but then the caulking is painted in green. So this is from a commission for the Aspen Art Fair in 2019. This is from Wave Hill in the Bronx. And so to speak about immersive installation, it's something I've been doing and been familiar with how to create immersive installations. I just wasn't always incorporating video with them. All to say, so I was interested in trying to create a painting that was a barrier, but that was permeable, that you could see through, that you could understand what was going on the other side, but it was a physical barrier to you. And I was thinking about W.E.B. Du Bois and the veil that he talks about in Souls of Black Folk. And the veil is this veil between Blackness and whiteness, and it's something you can perceive. And it is a true kind of barrier, but it is something that is at least like permeable with your eye. You can see through it, you understand it's there. And so I was thinking about the sort of a physical manifestation of that. And basically just started, was walking through the hardware store as like using that as an art store. Like, well, what can I use? And I bought a few different types of substrates. Mesh was the main one I kept experimenting with. And then basically everything in a tube in the hardware store I bought and tried. So like every glue, every like gel, everything, I just tried to see what worked best, what took paint best. And so that was probably a year or two of experimenting with just different materials and like kind of small scale things until I found this material that I felt worked well, was flexible, it took paint well. And then from there kind of started to scale up into these much larger installations. And so that's kind of where the caulking on mesh came from, the long answer.
Fantastic. What a great answer to that question. So revealing. Mia, is that kind of work that we were just looking at maybe what you were expecting when you reached out to Adrienne about this opportunity?
I didn't have any expectation. I didn't go into it with any expectation. We just discussed what I was thinking about. We were thinking about nature, ancestry, the elements. We talked about trees and genetics. I mean, we sort of were all over the place, and it was really organic. I mean, I sort of approach curation that way. And I was telling Adrienne this when we started, I just sort of like to have, especially for something like this, where it's bespoke, like it's space-based. And I guess I could have said, maybe we can have some paintings on the wall or something, but I think it was very organic. I didn't have any expectation. I didn't know I just knew that I would probably really enjoy whatever she came up with. And like you said, it's quite enchanting. I mean, it truly is, and I look forward to seeing how it develops, because she's very thoughtful about and intentional about everything. So
Thank you.
One of the aspects of the piece, the installation, that I think is really special is that, that room, it's great to hear that you like immediately saw this as a really exciting opportunity, because can actually be a really challenging room. It's kind of weird dimensions with a very high ceiling. The lighting capabilities are a little weird, and it's, just these hard surfaces, and the doors even in kind of a weird place. And one of the effects of your installation is you've created what feels like an organic environment. And I don't think it's just about the imagery in the videos or the water sound. It's also the relationship of those things to each other, and how the different cycles of the different videos kind of blur the edges. It's not obvious when you're in there where there's a start and a begin and an end. And so you've somehow taken this space and made it, made the atmosphere, the environment is not only immersive, but it also really feels organic too.
Yeah, I think that because it's a kind of odd space with it's very tall. It feels, it's funny, it's like it's not small, but it feels, it's, if you're thinking about work in terms of like hanging paintings on a wall, it might feel restrictive, like you kind of like would maybe want less of the height and more of the like wall or something,
Exactly.
like you'd want it to be something else. But because I think also in installate, like I am a painter and I do make paintings that go on a wall in a very traditional way, but I also am an installation artist. I think about space. I think about my response to space, but also the viewer's response to space, that I'm never trying to make a space something it's not. I'm always thinking about, what does the space need? Like, what will work with this space? How can I, like, what work will be best enhanced by this space? So it was more of the, like, I really couldn't have an idea before seeing the space. And it was exciting to be able to just have the sort of timeline of, you know, being able to go there and then have a bunch of time to think about it, because this wasn't the kind of space that I think I could have easily conceptualized something and dropped it in and felt as successful with it.
Sure.
It really needed to feel like, oh, okay, this is what this space could be. This is what the space could do.
Yeah. Yeah. Adrienne Curtis asked, do you have a complete, well, I think you basically just answered this, but maybe you'll have something you want to add. Do you have a complete vision of the piece before you start, or does the vision evolve as the work progresses? And if it's the latter, how do you decide when it's finished?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll maybe also answer it not just about this piece, but sort of in general and like projects. So with this one, again, I didn't have an idea, didn't even want to have an idea before visiting the space. And then there was that period of conceptualizing it after experiencing the space, but I don't live in Vermont. Did not visit the space in between the first visit and seeing the show. And so then there's the memory of the space and then the idea, and hoping that those things marry well. And luckily they did. But so there was how it turns out at that point, it does feel a bit up to maybe not chance, but there's like a lot of factors. I will say with these installation pieces, like this one has a whole story of like when you work in installation, especially when you're hanging things from a ceiling, like you start to get used to like everything that possibly could happening, or every surprise happening, or somebody not telling you that something is there or isn't there, or can't happen. And so this is one where I had an idea, but I intentionally, knowing it was for an art fair where there's like movable and temporary walls and things happening, that there's some pieces that can be moved. So a lot of times in installation work, I'm kind of already troubleshooting the possibility of there being issues by making the work more flexible or amenable to changes. So this was made in a way that like these hanging pieces in the hallway that are coming down vertically, there was no specified sort of distance of where they need to be. They just need to be sort of in a trajectory where you can walk through them. And then these sort of canopy sort of sweeping hanging pieces were not at all what I thought they were going to be for what the space was supposed to be in the original plan. And so you just I had to sort of go with what it was. And again, I made the piece in such a way that it could flex and it could change with what the space needed. And then this one was maybe the only time that I've ever drawn a sketch, and I had visited the space before, again, similar to the Brattleboro show. I'd visited the space before, and I drew a sketch, and when we installed the piece, it was the first time I was like, no, this is exactly like the sketch. There was nothing about the piece in person really changed, and it was kind of incredible to have that. Even this one at Brattleboro, there's a couple differences just based on like the scale of the video. I'm like, okay, the projector actually needs to be a little bit bigger. It needs to be a little smaller. This, like the water kind of coming up a little closer to the wall than I originally thought, just because like, just the dimensions of like how things get projected were just a little different than what I had anticipated. So it's rare, but like, this is one where it really, like, if you look at the original sketch in the sketchbook, it's spot on to what it was supposed to be.
Cool. Great question from Curtis. Adrienne, Mia, is there anything else, anything that we haven't covered or that you wanted to express or share tonight before we wrap things up?
I mean, I just want to say thank you to Mia, to you, Danny, to Sarah, and everybody at the museum for letting me have this space and letting me show my work and invite people into it, and to kind of steward the work for this time. I really appreciate it. And it's been a really great experience.
Yes, it's been quite lovely. Everyone we've encountered and met has just been exceptional, very warm. So thank you. And thank you, Adrienne, for saying yes. Because you never know.
Yeah. And it was great to see the other shows up at the same time, because there's great
Oh,
shows up at
yes.
the same
Oh
time.
my
So it's
God.
like, it's just like nice to be in that kind of company, you know, staff and work and other artists. So yeah, great experience.
That's all really lovely of you both, and I assure you the feeling is totally mutual. It's this has been such a joy and a privilege to work with you both, and Adrienne, to have this work up in our museum. It's been really wonderful. Which maybe is like a segue to the last question I have here in the queue from Jeffrey, who asks, any plans to return to Brattleboro? So I don't know, maybe we'll talk about that at some point.
I mean, definitely for like, you know, whether you invite me or not, I'm sure I'll come back sometimes whenever I'm
Oh,
near
good.
Vermont.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
100%. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed driving from New York City to Vermont in that sort of overnight in the fall. It was so beautiful. I mean,
Yeah,
just like picturesque, picture perfect, beautiful. So yeah.
yeah. Well, it's been a magical experience in many ways. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you both so much for spending this time with us tonight. Thank you, everyone out there, for joining us. If you find yourself in the Brattleboro area and you have not seen Adrienne's installation in person, I hope you'll come to the museum. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 4. Admission is you pay whatever you wish. And the exhibition is up through March 8th. And the last thing I want to mention is that if you enjoyed this event tonight and would consider making a donation to support this type of free programming, or perhaps even become a member of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, we would be very grateful for that. And you can just go to our website and take care of that there. That's brattleboromuseum.org. You click on support. So thank you again, Adrienne, Mia. Thank you, everyone out there. Have a good night. Hope to see you soon.
Night.
Bye. Thank you.